Where's your tea?
It's just here, look. Get going.
Welcome to Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. Decoding the beliefs and strategies of global experts to give you an updated mindset to make the most of modern life. Hosted by the UK's most in-demand and highest-paid hypnotherapist, Adam Cox.
Hi, it's Adam here, and this is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. Joining me today, we've got Helen Rose Kalia Jacobs, who has a fascinating story and is a nutritional fusion chef. Welcome to the show, Helen.
Hello.
Great to have you here. Now, we were speaking a little bit before we went live. You have got one of the most, I would say, impressive stories of transformation I think I've heard. But give us a bit of an insight in terms of your life before everything changed. You know, what was it like kind of growing up, and what kind of person were you before your transformation?
I was born with a condition, a genetic condition called albinism, which basically means I don't have any pigment. So I have white hair. I have visual impairment, which I think it ranged from being legally blind just strictly before my transformation. I was legally blind the whole time. But I frequently scored in the top 2% with Oxford University for various things. And so I have quite a brilliant mind. I was the only girl at an all-boys grammar school frequently. And I just excelled at everything. And I became a behavioural scientist. So I had quite a glittering career before all this happened. And I talked with a, well-to-do voice and dressed the part and everything as well. But I was married at a very early age. I had a child when I was a teenager, my first child, and I was in quite a depressive state for a very, very long time. And so before my extensive transformation, I was a highly successful person, a great mum, but I was miserable and really, really large.
And how large were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'd gone up to over 32 stone at my biggest. So I used to fluctuate between 28 and 32 stone.
And, to give maybe a context, because not everyone's going to be thinking in terms of stones, and certainly my mind thinks in terms of kilos. So I'm already trying to work out what you are in kilos, or what you were, sorry. What dress size were you back then at your head?
32 to 34.
32 to 34. So
yeah, I used to have to get specialist clothes from like designer makes from like Dawn French. There was a French Antique, I think, was the sort of like the dress code for the office type because it was large enough but not clingy enough, didn't cling to your skin.
What were some of the challenges at being that weight? Because I mean that's kind of larger than, I would say the majority of people in the country. Did that have issues in terms of mobility? Did that have issues in terms of, kind of judgment from other people?
Breathing was, I used to breathe really loud. And one of the key things that other people have commented on, like my family, my children, my grown-up children, they never know if I'm in anymore, because before they'd put their key in the door and they could hear me breathing, even if I was over the other side of the house. My breathing was very labored and very forced. And now when I'm asleep, even, I'm so small and and silent, they never know if I'm in. So it's that was probably the biggest thing. And then skin sores, where your skin rubs together. It was just a highly uncomfortable, terrible state to be in. But I was one of those people that said, it doesn't bother me, I'm quite happy. But I was dying inside, absolutely dying, because I didn't feel glittery or beautiful, or I wasn't impressing myself in any way, shape or form, and I was just dying inside.
So when you said, it doesn't bother me, I'm happy, was that a front? Was that a mask that
Yeah,
you put
yeah,
onto the world? What was the
completely.
real emotion that was going on, behind that kind of exterior where people are looking at you, being that way? Did you get that kind of looks, or did people say anything when you're that
Well,
kind of?
yeah, in my head, ever since I was a young age, because I looked different, I'd grown up with this programming of you're ugly, you're never going to look like a real woman, you're never going to fit in. My first husband was addicted to pornography, and he used to be constantly saying it, that because I don't have dark colored hair in private areas, he was constantly saying things like, oh, you look deformed. It's not true, obviously, but that's the programming that was going into the subconscious. So I think that for me, becoming a super large person fitted that programming. It was the outside fitted the inside pretty much. I felt ugly. I had the front because I was a successful businesswoman. I was this huge behavioral scientist dealing with some of the most horrific crimes in England. And, I was really successful and I was good at everything I do. I'm still good at everything I do, but I was absolutely soul destroyed inside. I really did feel horrendous.
As a hypnotherapist, when I try and get people to the point where they're ready to make a change, it's getting them to the point of threshold where that should change, would like to change becomes I'm a total must and I'm going to change and nothing's going to stop me. Was there a particular catalyst for this transformation for you, that you were this kind of overweight person, you felt, to use your words, empty inside, kind of like not, kind of happy? What
Well, I
was the
was
catalyst for
hiding.
change?
I had been hiding. My children's ambition was that mum would show up for something. Mum never went to anything. Mum never went to, they were dancers and they were on stage a lot. And I used to go and hide in back, even though I couldn't see. I was like, well, I'm here, and I felt like that was enough because I was homeschooling and it was all the extracurricular things that they were doing. I just didn't turn up because I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want to see me.
Yeah.
So it was my children's ambition. And one day I went out I was late for an appointment. It was pouring with rain. It was like sheet rain was coming down. And where I do have a visual impairment, I was rushing, but I didn't really know what was happening. And suddenly 2 guys had appeared either side of me and they dragged me behind some wheelie bins. And we ended up getting into a huge fight because I don't know if you're aware, but when you're a large person, you do think that you can throw your weight and it's going to be enough. Well, I did start to fight back, but it ended up in a huge fight and they ended up jumping on, stamping and kicking all over my torso, my abdomen, and my abdomen blew up and I ended up being raped at the scene. And then I had a 6-inch blade was actually plunged into my neck. I have a sizable scar here. And I actually died at the scene. It missed my vertebrae, but it severed some nerve cord that left me paralyzed. I woke up from there paralyzed in hospital. And that for me, I was lying in bed, willing myself to die nonstop, just nonstop. Every time I opened my eyes, I just didn't want to be there because I could hear my children basically growing up. Like one year, it was 2000 so that happened in 2006, and then 2009 I was still in bed, and it had snowed really bad up north. It had everything had shut, and up north things don't close because they're used to harsh weather, but this particular year everything shut because the snow was intensely deep. So my children were outside making snowmen and stuff, and I could hear them, and it was completely devastating. I was listening to them having fun and doing all this stuff, and they were quite tearful that I wasn't involved, and I was tearful that I wasn't involved. And so 2010, I started to after the bad weather had passed, and it was months, I mean, it was sort of like the end of February time, I started to make appointments to go and seek professional help and ask questions. And all the doctors just kept saying, I've lost my spleen, I've lost 3/4 of my pancreas, my abdomen is held together with clips and staples and loads of metal, and there's nothing they could do. And I just wouldn't accept it. And it got to the point where I can tell you the exact date and time. It was April the 29th, 2010. They told me this for the last time. The doctor actually held my hand like this, was stroking it like this. I'm very sorry, dear. You're just going to have to get used to doing everything from a seated position. I was like, fuck that. And I started screaming. And they'd given me an electric wheelchair a couple of weeks before, and I didn't know how to operate it properly. And I couldn't see either. So I started pushing the wheelchair's controls, and I completely wrecked his office. And security had to escort me out of the building because I was so angry. Like, I was just not accepting it. And I went home and I vowed that I was going to communicate with myself and stick with the narrative that, yes, they're talking bullshit. I am going to run about with my children if it kills me. And that was kind of like the catalyst, what did it.
Yeah, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was kind of like, yeah. I can't allow, what the doctors are telling you, some would say a polarity response. They're saying, get used to being immobile for the rest of your life. And you're like, no, not willing to accept that. Do you think this kind of extensive academic background, knowing how, thoughts become things and this kind of very well researched background, did it help you at some level to kind of harness the power of your mind? Or do you think it was just something was unlocked that you had this will to have a different future than the one they were telling you were going to have?
Both really. It was a bit of both. I mean, for me, I'm obviously now very big in the personal development world, but I didn't have the dialogue before. I knew stuff because I grew up I'm 51. I grew up in times before all this internet and computers. I did all my business training, my qualifications and everything before I had the internet. I mean, I used to have the internet on Global Village dial-up modem back in the day. I was a computer user before the internet existed, so all of this sort of like this personal development space, it has helped shaped the now me. But back then when I was going through the transformation, I mean, I spent the whole of 2010 after that appointment researching, emailing the life out of anyone and everybody that I could find who would possibly know how to help me with unusual abdominal injuries. And I knew in my head that I had to basically shrink my body. And of course, being paralyzed, the narrative is that you eat less and exercise more, yes? But when you're paralyzed, how do you do that? How do you actually do that? How can you lose weight when you can't move? So that was where my training into mindset and the nervous system and everything, that's where that came in. So when I said it was a bit of both, this is the psychological training of not letting that, the tiny little factor that I couldn't move my body, just not let that creep in, just not let that be a thing. And then my subconscious was already exercising and already doing everything I wanted to do long before I actually did do it. When I went through the whole of 2011 and the surgeon that I had found specialized in really obscure abdominal surgery. He'd trained in Singapore, so he'd trained in the East. And he was a white British male, but he'd trained in Singapore, Australia, Eastern medicine. And, I really liked him. I was messaging him nonstop, sending medical records. And one day he called. I think he got super sort of like fed up of me harassing him. And I was harassing him. Like I was sending, I think, 60 emails a week and phoning his secretary nonstop. Because I just wanted my voice to be heard. And I felt like my voice wasn't being heard. And he said, look, you're just too fat. You're just too overweight. I couldn't possibly look at you. I couldn't even have you in for an appointment because if I wanted to do anything, I can't because the risk of death is just too high with somebody your size. So that was the second catalyst. I was like, right, okay. So how much do I need to shrink by for you to even pick up the phone and call me back? He said 5 stone. I said, right, done. I'll call you back. So 1st of January 2012, I did it. I took a long, hard look at myself. I got the nurses that were visiting me every day, I got them to undress me and put me in front of the mirror naked. And that's something I teach now, is if you really want to change something, look at yourself naked. If you're eating nonstop, do it in front of the mirror naked. It changes everything. It's a complete game changer. So I started basically not wearing clothes. And that was my fierce kind of rebellion. It was like, you must comply. Well, fuck that. In my own house, I can do what I want, yeah? And paralyzed or not, and I'm gonna. So I started to do things, and they were coming, the nurses were coming, and they thought that I'd lost my mind. They really did. They were assessing me nonstop. They were sending in different psychiatric people to assess me. One top psychiatric guy, actually, he came, and I fell in love with him, like, instantly, because he said, well, she's upset. She's understandably upset. I actually agree with everything she said. And I was like, oh, thank you. I was just so like, that was
validated. He saw the world the way you saw it.
Yeah, and now the turning point, because I was saying to him, well, look, I'm not in control of anything. If somebody made me a cup of tea, yeah, like you've made yourself a cup of tea, if it was even a millimeter out of reach, yeah, when you're paralyzed, you're like this. You want the tea. There's no one in the room. Like you're doing this. That was my life. That was basically my life. And so that was basically my life. Who wants their children to see them doing that? Like my jaw was vibrating, like I couldn't do a thing. Like I couldn't even pick up my own cup. I was like, I had to wait for people.
There's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration.
Honestly.
But it seems like, through different, kind of events, you were able to harness that kind of frustration, that disappointment, that kind of annoyance, at kind of your situation. You didn't choose to be in this situation, but you're in there. It's a very frustrating situation, but you were able to kind of channel that and harness that in a way to start making progress. And you then lost that 5 stone, and I'm assuming you called this. I
lost 8 actually, and
wow.
I rang him back. I lost 8, and I rang him back, and I said,
he must have been surprised.
If I lost 5, you'd speak to me.
Yeah.
And he said, how much have you lost? He was expecting me to say like 10 or 12 pounds. And I sent him photos. I was like, well, this was my passport photo. This was my passport. I've had to send in a new photo because it doesn't look anything like me now. And I'd lost 8. I said, I've just renewed my passport. Look. And so I'd sent, and he called, and he was absolutely blown away. He's come and see me, but I'm in Bournemouth. I was like, oh my God, I'm in Newcastle. I'm at 9 miles outside Newcastle. I can't move. How am I going to get to Bournemouth? Anyway, so, but in my head, I was already there. So we raised the money, got there. I got wheeled in at 6:30 in the morning. He took one look at me and he's like, you've got albinism. You didn't tell me that. I said, well, why would I? My albinism wasn't injured, was it? Like, why would I tell you that? Like, it's irrelevant. Like, and I got really angry. And he was like, no, it's just that I run a television company and I really want to look at your abdomen. And if you agree to do all my TV programs, I'll look at your abdomen for free. That would be the fee. So I was like, all right, so I go on TV and you'll look at my abdomen. And if you can operate, you will. And he said, yes. So I went, deal. And we shook on it, and that was that. And he had me in within a month, and I had a TV crew move into my house, and we did embarrassing bodies, fat surgeons, the fat doctor, Channel 4's, oh God, what's it called? The program where they talk about food for overweight people.
Yeah, no, I know the one.
I did them
Yeah, it
all.
was kind of super size versus super skinny and all this kind of stuff.
My skin sores and skin tags and bed sores, urine burns, everything was all featured on TV. And then I spoke extensively in floods of tears the whole time about how ugly I felt and how I was doing this because I wanted to be an attractive woman. I never said anything about children or anything. I said, look, I'm a sexy, flamboyant, vibrant woman, young woman in my head, in my heart. I need the outside to reflect this now. And I was really saying it. And he went into my abdomen live on television, and it's Shaw Summers. Shaw Summers is the guy's name, the doctor. And he went in and he said, look, I've explained to Helen the dangers of this, you know, that basically I could have died. And he went into my abdomen and he found injury after injury after injury after injury. And he just kept operating for 12 and a half hours. And in the live feed of my abdomen obviously couldn't put 12 and a half hours on, but he put snippets on in these programs, and he showed. And then I woke up from that operation in recovery with 4 film crew men who'd moved in with me. And I saw a toilet. You know, when you're in a hospital room and a private room and there's a toilet in front of you. I saw the toilet, and where I was so drugged up, I threw the sheet off me, got up and walked to the toilet.
And I stood
there.
14 film crew in there.
I stood there shaking like, because I hadn't moved for 7 years.
Wow. And you were able to get up and walk?
I was so out of it on drugs from the surgery that it was in the recovery suite, and it was all filmed by these 4 camera guys that had moved in with me. They were waiting for me to wake up. And as soon as I've opened my eyes, I've thrown the sheet back and just seen the toilet.
Your body knew you could do it.
And gone to the toilet. And I didn't even think about it. I just wanted to pee. I didn't even remember that I was paralyzed because I'd done so much work on my subconscious to not be paralyzed. I was living as if I wasn't paralyzed the whole time. Like from that appointment in April 2010 to New Year's Eve 2012, that whole time I was programming my subconscious that I was moving and I was walking and I was dancing and I was doing stuff. So as soon as I've opened my eyes from this surgery, he's like rejoined all the nerve channels and everything. My mind was walking already.
Yeah, you'd matched up the mind with the body at that point from the surgery. Yeah. And it sounds like he, you know, in the same way that you were a magician with your mind, he was a magician with your body and kind of repairing that. So, you know, as a hypnotherapist, I work with a lot of people to change how they think about themselves and their future and that kind of stuff. So when you say programming your mind, are we talking here about inner dialogue, like affirmations, telling yourself that you could do stuff?
I wasn't just telling myself, I was feeling, I was 100,000%. All I was able to do was lie on my back and move when somebody moved me. So I had time to really, really observe what my body felt like in my head, because I couldn't feel anything.
I see.
But in my head, I knew what it felt like to have sex. I knew what it felt like to dance. Anything that fills the body with adrenaline and really feel good feelings. I had so much time on my hands to feel these things. So I believe you had my good friend Elliot on.
I did, yeah, very recently. Ago.
Well, when I met him, I was actually 19 days into a 40-day fast when I met him. And, you know, I started saying, you know that thing where you can, when you're fasting and you suck a lemon beforehand and you get your body to remember the sensation. So when you're fasting, if you fancy anything, you just sort of close your eyes and you remember the sensation of the lemon. That's probably the easiest thing to explain, because I was lying there remembering how all these things felt. So all the things I loved to do as a woman, I was remembering how they felt, and I was really, really avidly feeling them.
You were associated into those
body,
yeah.
I could feel stuff. So my brain and my mind was feeling things the entire time. So even though physically you could get, stab me up, I couldn't feel it, right? On my legs or anything, I couldn't feel it. But my head knew what it felt like. So my head would know. My head knew what it was like to do ballet. My head knew what it was like to do tap as a child, tap dancing. My head knew what it was like to swim, because I was a brilliant swimmer when I was a teenager. My head knew how all those things melt. In fact, when I had various talking therapies, because that's all that, when I had various talking therapies, they would say, what's your happy place? And I would... I'd flippantly be saying, well, on the bottom of a swimming pool, 12.5 meters deep, but I meant it. I 1,000% meant that, because that's how I could feel. I felt like I was drowning the entire time. So I felt like, okay, I'm going to be on the bottom of this pool, and it's going to be the most magical, most insane experience, and I'm going to love it. And so that sensation of drowning, where being paralyzed from the diaphragm down, is like being drowned. Yeah. It's like as soon as someone moves you, it's like you are drowning. And it's like they kept on having to inject codeine, and well, they said they had to. I've ditched all the big pharmaceuticals. 7-8 years ago now. I just flatly refused to have anything to do with it ever again, because they were dosing me up with so much stuff. I didn't know what day it was at one point. And, so they were injecting my diaphragm with codeine and tramadol liquids, and morphine at one point. And I was like, no, you're clouding my thoughts. My thoughts are magical. My thoughts are, I'm dancing. I'm Thumbelina right now, and I probably did sound a bit crazy doing that, but it was, there's a huge movement now where fairy stories are being used in trauma recovery. And I was so happy to read this the other day. There's a Dr. Lipton, I think she's called, she's doing a study using fairy stories as trauma, because I kept saying, well, I'm like the princess and the pea, you keep moving various things in my bed, and my head knows you've done it, even though I wasn't aware physically. My head knows it's uncomfortable. And so I kept saying things like this. Yeah. And like my hair had grown down to my knees. So I was like, well, clearly I look like Rapunzel today. I need someone to plait my hair. And I was like, maybe a prince will climb up and rescue me, and I was saying things like this. And that's how I kept a beautiful kind of narrative going with everything.
It sounds very playful, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a natural response to trauma, because you're connecting with your inner child with all these kind of fairy stories, and at some level they're empowering. I'm also getting kind of recollections of a book I read many, many years ago, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, where, not very different circumstances, but you've got a guy who is in a concentration camp. They're taking everything from him, but they couldn't take away the power of his thoughts. Exactly. So he was kind of had nothing, but in his mind, he had everything. And it sounds like a very similar thing. Physically, you couldn't move, but you had the ability to use your mind in such a way that you could feel things in your imagination that you couldn't possibly feel in reality, which is very similar to kind of phantom limb syndrome, where people feel a sensation in a limb that doesn't exist. That might be amputated, but they can feel it as if it's real. And it seems like you were able to use your mind in such a way to have physical sensations that weren't there in reality, but you could imagine them so vividly that it felt like they were real. And that's effectively a very powerful way of using your mind.
Well, definitely. I went to a special school for visually impaired, partially sighted and blind children. And then I went to grammar school. And so I had a very, very kind of regimented upbringing with the schooling system. And I'm so thankful. I can't even describe how thankful I am, because it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Like I excelled at music. If you go to a blind school, one of the things you excel at is music, radio, piano tuning. All the things that you use your ears for. But I was able to then lie down as a paralyzed woman and count myself into a rhythm, and then I'd get into the rhythm, and I suppose it's like hypnosis, where you get into this meditative state and you suddenly realize, oh, I'm swimming right now, or I'm dancing right now, or I'm running around the athletic track right now, you know, I'm and I feel the wind in my face, and I'm loving it, and you know, and that's pretty much how it was. So when I went through after this surgery, I went through rehabilitation, and I got wheeled out to this athletics track, and I was just in love. I threw myself. I said, look, you know, they didn't even have time to tilt the chair so I could go on the floor. I was like, no, I've got to feel it. I have to feel it. I have to remember the feeling. And I was all about the feeling. I was just gripped with like, no, I seriously did probably look crazy. But I was like, no, I have to put my hands on it. I have to smell it, you know, and I was like, wow, this is what it feels like. Okay, take me away. And I went home, and I was just like, in my head, I was running. And then it was just a case of getting the muscles, growing a core, you know, doing everything that I possibly could, losing more weight. And to date, I've lost 292 pounds, which is an average bodybuilder weighs 292 pounds. So I've lost pretty much a person off myself.
Well, not just a person, but a giant person.
Yeah.
You know, bodybuilders aren't small people. And it seems to, do you think, by the way, that growing up with a visual impairment, they say that when you lose or you're depleted in one sense, your other senses get stronger. Do you feel that being visually impaired actually meant that your inner vision, your mind's eye, became stronger because of that lack of vision in reality?
Yeah, because it became very difficult for me to explain how I saw things, because I saw things in terms of smell, taste, feel, and listening, and
kind of synesthesia in a way.
Yeah. So when I was presented, it's like a Christmas tree to me always looks like the most magical thing. So somebody could be sitting there saying, yeah, but it's really messy and that, but I wouldn't notice that. I'd just see all this, the sparkliness and the magic of it, you know, and I would feel that throughout every cell of my being, you know, that I'm in the presence of something magical. And that's pretty much how I conduct myself. I think it's pretty much how I always conducted myself. But in the past, I was very sad. Now I'm not sad. I'm just abundantly thankful. Even, see, you mentioned the soul earlier, and I just want to touch on that for a minute.
Yeah.
When I was willing myself to die, I really was arguing with like the universe, God, every spirit known to man. I was swearing, inwardly shouting, like, kill me now. What the fuck's wrong with you? You know, like, what use is it for me to be here? And then I had this like overwhelming sensation one day that my soul actually isn't damaged goods. My soul's not damaged at all. And I didn't actually do anything. So why would I want to die? And then that became huge. That was a huge turning point for me. So I don't know if I was like hypnotizing myself or whatever, but that was it. It was like, what can you do that your cells can actually use, woman? You know, like, you're just a mass of cells. You know, the cells that I've got today weren't the same as they were yesterday or 2 weeks ago, in fact. And so I really did. The narrative was, for me, your soul was never damaged goods. It doesn't matter if anybody else can see things the same way that you do. It doesn't matter if people can't feel the magic in everything. It doesn't, you know, you just carry on. And one day you'll be able to tell everyone. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, I am a hypnotist, and it sounds to me that you hypnotize yourself against you and then for you. You know, while you were miserable, while you weren't happy in your life, I think there was a lot of suggestions that probably led to eating and doing things that probably were a coping mechanism to deal with that sadness or emptiness. And then when something changed, one of the things that, you know, is very, very useful in hypnosis is something called pseudo orientation in time, going to a future version of yourself and seeing yourself with the kind of life that you want. And from our brief chat before we went live, this hypnotic tactic. It seems like you're a master at this. It seems like you
Yeah.
had.
It's my signature workshop now. It's been running every week since January 2020. I initially did it as a thank you gift to very close friends. You know, some of them were really struggling with various things that year. And this was before the world turned crazy in March. So this was January 2020. Some of them were really struggling. And I said, look, you know, I do this thing. I ask myself, but future version of myself, I ask her, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? I can show you how if you like. And so I started it. memories from my future self. And seriously, they told, one or two of them told their friends, and then they told their friends, and then they told them. I didn't even have to advertise it on social media. It's just like bang, it's just gone every week since then. And I sit there and I play them a little tune, and I do a little meditation, and I get them to tell me, describe the scene, feel the scene of themselves 5 years in the future, or even 2 years in the future sometimes. It depends on who's sitting there, you know, and it is a pretty magical experience. And so 2 years ago, one lady said she imagines herself as a fully paid artist. You know, she'd retired and she was doing painting and she wanted to be an artist. She wrote to me the other day. She said, you never guess what? I said, you're up in a gallery. And she said, yeah. How did you know? I said, because you told me 2 years ago that this version of yourself was. She went, oh yeah. Like, she was absolutely like gobsmacked because she had described it 2 years ago to me. This like now. She had described it.
And this is what people call law of attraction. You know, it's when you kind of see a future version of yourself in such a compelling and realistic way that actually it unlocks the very resources to create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The universe just puts everything in your path that enables you to do that thing.
What was of all the things, and obviously you had a lot of time to think about the future and the kind of future that you wanted, was there a particular future version of yourself that you went to again and again, and it was that future that kind of made you so resourceful? Because you did incredible things, losing a lot of weight, going through painful surgery, going through lots and lots of challenges. Was there a particular future version of yourself that was so compelling that unlocked a lot of your resources?
This moment right now.
Amazing.
One, definitely, without a doubt. Because I used to be so hiding before. I was so reclusive. Even neighbours who'd lived next door to me for 12 years didn't know what I looked like. I was so like hiding. I used to go to do my job, put food on the table for my children, and just hide and watch videos and sit there. And I never got involved in anything. I never felt beautiful. And so I wanted that was all I ever wanted, was to feel like me. just feel like me. And I do now. So the driving force for me was being able to, I used to be that person at events where you'd go to events because I really wanted to learn. Like, I had to learn this personal development language, you know, because I'd done all this great stuff, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to, I didn't know that lady sitting at home that just wakes up and she's just can't get out of bed that day, and she doesn't want to go to her training session or her therapy or whatever it is she's got booked. She doesn't want to go. She just feels so hideous inside. That lady might have heard me, and I get, number one message I get regularly, I get over 500 a month of these. Well, you know, I wasn't going to get up this morning, but I thought of you and I thought of what you would do. And I knew that you would go. So I went. Now I feel fantastic. You know, that's I wanted to be that person that people said that to. You know, I wanted to be that person that people remembered and said, because of you, I did this. And I am that now. And, you know, you can't ever rewrite that. That's who I always have been. That's who I visioned I was, and that's who I am. So when you ask me which version of myself did I picture, this one talking to you right now.
And I think one of the most inspiring things that anyone can do is go on a journey of profound transformation when there is incredible challenges and obstacles on the way. So, I can feel your energy, and it's so positive. I'm inspired because the journey that you went through, I would say most people would have given up. Most people would have accepted their fate when that doctor's kind of stroking your hand saying, just get used to this. I think a lot of people.
I'm very sorry, dear. If anyone calls me dear now, it's like every hair stands up, and I'm like,
you've got
I wanted to run the other way.
A trauma reaction to that stimulus. But it's so inspiring, and it seems like now, going through the journey of losing so much weight at a time where you couldn't have done any exercise. And you're right, the two key ways to lose weight are, change what you eat and exercise more. You couldn't exercise more because you couldn't move. Therefore, you must have a really good understanding of how food has an impact on the body, particularly if you can't burn that many calories. So this title of a nutritional fusion chef, it sounds magical. It sounds like you're an alchemist of food. Tell me a bit about that and how you create this kind of fusion to create change in bodies through nutrition.
Well, my birth family is Anglo-Indian. So my father comes from South India, and my birth mother came from North India in Calcutta. And my grandfather was Anglo-Indian, and he lived for a long time in Burma and Thailand on the Mandalay River, on the banks of the Mandalay River. And so I kind of, my early years were, food was quite big. And I got bullied a lot for the types of food that I smelt of. And I, obviously at the visually impaired environment, the smell would come first, so it was always spices and different garlics and different chilies and different. I was in a quiz once when I think I was like 9, and name a vegetable beginning with A, and I was like, yeah, aubergine, and then one of the bully girls was like, well, I can't help it if she eats weird things in her house, and it was like, so I had this like very early education of Eastern food. So that was the first step. And then, so when I was, anybody with a Eastern culture, so whether it's Chinese, Indian, any kind of like Asian kind of like, they will tell you if they don't eat rice laced with chilies and coriander at least 6 times a week, they feel like they haven't eaten. Now, one of the books that changed my life was Gok Wan. Now, I do a lot with him on Instagram and with Isolation Nation now. He wrote a book, and he wrote that in his book. He tried to lose weight because he was massive and he was starving. He felt like he was starving himself. So he then learned how to cook his parents' Chinese takeaway food in a way that he could eat it without taking amphetamines in order to lose weight. And that inspired me. So I started looking at my own culture food and how to fuse it with what was available to me. And then every food item is an energy. So you can literally go up to like any food item and hold your hand over it and you could feel its energy. So green foods, spinach, kale, cabbages, peppers, anything dark green has got a very, very high feel. So when you hold your hand above it, you can actually feel its energy. It's got an aura. I think aura is probably the correct term. And then colourful foods like yellow peppers, red peppers, pumpkins, they've all got an energy feel. And then when you feel things like a cheesecake or a tub of ice cream, there's no energy whatsoever. But when you eat it, your body produces endorphins and feel good chemicals temporarily, but your cells can't use any of that stuff. It just gives you a high just for a little while.
It's a sugar rush, isn't it? And the dopamine hit, and then you have the crash afterwards.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I inspire people with food as the nutritional fusion chef now is not to see food as treats. Food is not treats. Food is fuel for your cells. So if you've had, like me, I had my spleen removed. So I had autoimmune disease and immune deficiency for a long while. because I had no spleen. So my immune system was just wrecked. It was just gone. And I kept getting blisters and skin sores. My face was covered in blisters, so that kind of like enhanced the I'm ugly. That enhanced that narrative. And so I learned which foods would be able to rewrite at cellular level that narrative. And I fell in love with, I think you have to fall in love with things as you're doing them. I fell in love with the process of learning about different foods and what impact they have on my own body. And now I'm able to teach people how to know for sure what they should be eating. So there's no such thing as a diet, because the word diet's got die in it. So, straight away it's a negative for your mind. So I like to say, well, permanent lifestyle changes or lifestyle enhancements make it a more magical experience. So you're connecting with your food instead of just eating, you're actually connecting. So we go through this intermittent fasting period and then we eat, and it's a magical experience every single time, because the food has been matched to your own vibration.
Yeah. And I think when you've got that good relationship with food, I think for a lot of people, and possibly I'm guessing it was in your case, when you were overeating, it wasn't because you were really enjoying the food. It was because it was meeting an emotional void.
Oh, hell no. I was anesthetizing myself.
It was self-medication.
I was completely anesthetizing myself through life. I would drink a whole bottle of red wine. I would brandy quite often.
Yeah.
And if anyone offered me Coke or anything, I'd be taking it like sweets. I'd be just like, oh yeah, this is great. I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to feel anything.
It's escapism.
I would just be numbed out of every experience, including motherhood, Like, I was a phenomenal mum. I've homeschooled for 28 years this year, and all my kids have got BA degrees. The one sitting opposite me right now taking pictures, she's got first class honours in film. So, I did really well with them. It wasn't that. I was phenomenal with academia. I just didn't want to be seen. But I felt so horrible. I felt ugly. And I wore this suit of armor. I carried around this big, huge shell. And then one day, two guys smashed it up. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am now that happened to me. Because if that didn't happen to me, if I didn't get stabbed in the neck, if I didn't have all these things, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. I probably would have died from anesthetizing myself.
And I like how you've reclaimed a moment of trauma to empower you at some level, because, they did take a moment from you, but you've kind of taken it back by giving it meaning to you. And I think that's really profound and
that's
powerful.
the point, isn't it? It was one moment, just one set of moments that lasted minutes in amongst the billions of other moments that I've got. I mean, when I'm doing workshops, I do encourage people. It's like one of my earliest memories of being with my father, because I've got back in touch with my birth father now, and we're having a relationship. We're getting to know each other now. One of my first memories was racing back, jumping on his lap and going like this, trying to whistle, because I just couldn't whistle. And I was like 4 or something. And I was trying to whistle and I just couldn't do it. And my dad was just like, keep going, keep blowing, softer, calm down. If you're not calm, it's not going to work. And he was really patient. And the same with riding bike, one of those old choppers that was out in the 70s with the L-shaped seat. I had one of them. I was on a red chopper, and now everyone was saying, she's blind, she can't do anything. My dad was like, well, I'm going to get a chopper. He put me on this chopper and he's talking away and I'm riding the damn bike and he's chatting away to me. And I suddenly realized I'd gone like right down the road and he was no longer next to me. And I just carried on talking, and suddenly that's the moment I fell off, when I realized that. So I've had this inspiring, he gave me Think and Grow Rich when I was like 15. So I've had this inspiring influence. He sent it to me in care. He'd sent me this book. You need to read this book. And The Seagull, he'd sent me these books. And I'm like, now I'm looking at all these people doing personal development and I'm thinking, but I did all that in the 80s when it first came out. Like my father always said, you sit there until you feel it. And that is just how I am. That is who I am. You feel the experience. You don't, the experience doesn't happen to you. Everything's just oscillating and you're part of that oscillation and you can choose what you feel. So yes, 2 guys raped me. Did that stop me from being a flamboyant person? Did that stop me from being a sexual, vibrant, attractive woman? No, it hasn't. It did for a while. I'm not going to lie, my soul was pretty much destroyed. But once I reclaimed myself and I realized that my soul was never damaged goods, then I could match my mind, body, soul, spirit, could all line up. And it was a completely magical sensation when one day I was meditating, and I really did. I honestly did. I saw myself sitting in a loft bedroom with a skylight. The sun was streaming through the skylight, but not touching me, because obviously I get burnt quite easily in the sun because of the pigment issue, the lack of pigment. And I could see myself sitting there making a picture out of these little pegs, the peg boards that you put the pegs in and you make. I used to love doing that because I could feel. So I could see myself sticking pegs in and making a daisy. And I turned around and smiled at myself. This little girl turned around in this sort of like the sun beaming through and smiled at me. And I knew that I was home. I knew that within my body, I was home and I could do anything then. And no one could talk me out of anything from that moment. No one could tell me. And to this day now, people do try, especially on social media. You get the odd person coming along going, that's not possible. I'm going, it is possible. I've lived the last 11 years of my life in the public eye. I do everything in the public eye. Obviously, I do have a private life, but my kids have grown up. I, as a mother, as a woman, I think everything's been in the public eye pretty much. And, I've been on TV. I wrote 2 books and because these 2 guys are in prison for attempted murder. And I was quite determined that I was going to have a life before they were released. So they've got another 6 years to serve. And I was very determined that by the time they come out, their lives would be so insignificant to me, because my life will be fantastic. And it is
amazing.
Fantastic. And I went to New York to have my books published because I just felt like that in a program of hiding was still present. And I had replaced it with hiding from them. And so I'd gone to New York, and then of course the world went crazy. I signed the contract. The world went crazy because you couldn't travel anymore. So suddenly I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Like, I've worked so hard for this. And so I had to wait the full 2 years. I had to wait to get myself out of the legal contract that I had with quite a big publishing house in New York City. And now I've got my books published in England, and I'm not afraid anymore. So I'm not hiding anymore. And so I think I sent you the dates. Depends on your perspective. That's like a memoir. It's coming out on May the 28th, I believe. And then July the 19th, which is my youngest son's birthday. The second one, which is a tiny second that I did write during the first lockdown period. And that's all about that tiny second that you need to change your life. Everything can just change in an instant, in a heartbeat, and you can choose which heartbeat that happens in. It doesn't have to be at the hands of 2 men that suddenly drag you behind some wheelie bins. It can be when you decide to claim yourself for yourself, not for anyone else, not for any other reason other than you need to be at home within your own body, because that's where you bloody well live.
Helen, I'm so inspired by this conversation. It's such a magical journey that you've been on, that you're right. If something traumatic didn't happen, potentially you would still be in that kind of body, feeling unhappy, just kind of doing what some people do, and that is drift through life, deeply unhappy, just kind of self-medicating with kind of food and drink and that kind of stuff. But your life did take a different change. And more importantly, you reclaimed it. You decided the future that you want. You saw it, you felt it, and you made it happen. And that's deeply inspiring. Give us the titles of the books again, and where perhaps people can find them when they're launched.
They're about to go on for pre-order, I think, in time for Mother's Day, which is at the end of March in the UK, the 28th of March. And I believe they're going to go on sale for pre-order then. So it depends on your perspective is my memoir. I didn't want to do an autobiography because I don't know why. It just felt like death. It just felt like a writing about death. Mm-hmm. I'm the founder of the Celebrate Life Guild because before I went for that surgery, I could have died. I looked up all about how somebody would celebrate my life. Like my children would obviously have to celebrate my life if I had died. And there wasn't a single thing by a living person that had written something to celebrate their lives. So I formed Celebrate Life Guild because I genuinely do believe that life's magical and you should honor yourself first before you leave it to your children to do when you're gone. You should remember who you are now, like in this moment right now. So I founded the Celebrate Life Guild. So that's a memoir from the Celebrate Life Guild. Basically just warts and all, I'm an avid journal person. So I had journals. I'd recorded myself doing journaling with a dictaphone, and I quite explicitly share how it really feels to be paralyzed, listening to your children growing up outside, playing and not being able to be part of it, not even being able to eat a meal with them, So that's the memoir. And then a tiny second is what I wrote to explain the process of choosing which moment you're going to reclaim yourself in.
Love it. Well, you certainly are the living example of both those things, reclaiming a life and obviously having a dramatic shift in a moment of decision. I think it's massively inspiring. Helen, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.
Thank you for listening to Modern Mindset with Adam Cox. To automatically receive the latest episodes, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, please share this episode with just one friend you think it could help. And if this episode helped you, please leave us a 5-star review. Modern Mindset, picking the brains of the world's leading minds.